Hi, my name is Brian Flett. I'm the Professional Services Global Practice Leader for Bentley Asset Performance Management and was formerly with Ivara Corporation. Bentley acquired Ivara in September of 2012, and with the acquisition came Ivara's software and methodology for asset performance management, or APM. This recording provides an overview of APM and an introduction into what is now called the Bentley APM methodology. We'll start by defining what is asset performance management and how does it fit into an overall asset lifecycle. Owner-operators are the key stakeholders in the APM part of the lifecycle. We'll take a look at some of their key pain points and identify what's important to the owner-operator. We'll then introduce the APM cycle and walk through the Bentley APM methodology for helping users to introduce the APM cycle into their organizations. At the end of this recording, we'll talk a bit about a typical implementation project and what some typical implementation approaches are. APM Overview 1 covers the first part of this agenda, and APM Overview 2 completes the material. The ARC Advisory Group is a leading technology and research advisory firm specializing in asset-intensive industry and infrastructure. On the top of this screen shows a traditional linear view of the asset lifecycle. It all starts with a gleam in someone's eye about how to meet a need for a particular product or service. A plan is developed for how to meet that need, and in asset-intensive industries, the first step in that plan typically requires the development of some kind of infrastructure, plant, or equipment. The asset's designed, materials are procured, and the asset is built. For some period of time, the asset is then operated and maintained, and ultimately it will reach the end of its useful life and be retired. The ARC Group has taken this traditional linear view and developed a more cyclic view of the asset lifecycle. Using a plant as an example, an engineering procurement construction firm, or EPC, is typically used for the purple bits to design, procure, and build the asset. ARC calls this part of the lifecycle project performance management. Then there's a handover to the owner-operators, who operate and maintain the equipment through its useful life. This part of the life cycle is called asset performance management, and that's the focus for today. As the plant's operated, the need may be identified for significant engineering modifications and/or equipment replacement. These capital requests will compete with other potential capital projects, such as creating new facilities, and be prioritized and ultimately approved or rejected through a process called asset and project portfolio management. The decision on when to retire or replace an asset often hinges upon the ongoing cost of maintenance versus the cost of replacement, and also upon the return that can be obtained by other potential uses of that capital. If the replacement is approved, the funded project loops back into the project performance management process to design and build the new asset. So the stakeholders for the asset performance management process are the owner-operators. What are their key pain points? What are the things they are most interested in? Well, from the asset lifecycle, the creation of the asset in the first place was justified based on an expected return during the operate and maintain stage of its life. The owner-operator is responsible for ensuring the organization obtains a decent return on the capital that was invested during the construction of the asset. This becomes even more of a challenge if the cost of construction was more than originally anticipated. Another potential pain point is operational efficiency. Regardless of what the asset originally cost to build, the operator wants to ensure he is producing a quality product or service at a reasonable price relative to his peers in the industry. However, it's not just financial concerns that keep operators up at night. No CEO wants his picture in the newspaper along with a story about an environmental disaster or great loss of life. Ensuring compliance to regulations and reducing health and safety risks to a manageable level are key concerns of any operator of large and dangerous capital equipment. So what is APM, and how does it help address the pain points for owner-operators? Well, this circle is how Bentley describes the APM cycle. It represents the business process components for doing APM well, and it's represented in a circle to reinforce the fact that this is a continuous improvement process, not a one-time exercise. We're going to review this cycle in detail throughout this presentation, but here's a quick introduction. Asset performance management typically starts at the bottom by defining the optimal maintenance strategy for a given piece of equipment. Moving clockwise around the wheel, the next step is to implement the identified strategy in the operational and maintenance systems of the organization. This seems like an obvious step, but there are many great maintenance strategies that have been defined by engineers and yet sit in binders on the shelf, never impacting the day-to-day jobs of trades and operators. The next step is performance management, which involves monitoring the performance of the asset to ensure it's doing its intended function, and looking for signs that that performance may be deteriorating. Ideally, we want to identify potential failures well in advance of their occurrence, so that in work management we can plan, schedule, and execute the maintenance work, all in the most efficient manner which minimizes the disruption to the production process. The fifth segment of the process is analysis and optimization, which involves analyzing the data that was collected in the previous 4 steps, identifying areas for improvement, and feeding back those improvement recommendations as updates to the originally defined maintenance strategy. So this sounds like a lot of work. Why should we bother? Well, most operators and maintenance personnel are doing 3 different types of maintenance work today. One of the most prevalent types of work is breakdown or firefighting work. We run the equipment until it breaks, and then we pull out all the stops to fix it and get the production process back up and running. This is a very expensive way to run maintenance. Production is stopped, operators are idle, and maintenance is working overtime, paying whatever it takes to expedite parts and put a temporary fix in place. We're doing too little to properly fix the equipment, and it's done too late in the process. Not only that, but the breakdown likely caused collateral damage to downstream parts of the process. Instead of paying a few bucks to replace the oil, we have a seized motor and have to replace the entire engine. Another type of maintenance work being done today is excessive preventative maintenance. It might be a good idea to change the oil on a regular basis, but you don't need to change it every couple of hours. A better example would be the major overhaul of a complex system, like a turbine or a generator. The more complicated the equipment, the more likely it is that tearing it down and putting it back together will actually introduce failures instead of avoiding them. Many organizations have maintenance programs that are like barnacles on a boat. Every time there's a breakdown, something gets added, but nothing's ever taken away. The result is that the organization is doing too much maintenance work, and it's being done before it's really required. The optimal type of maintenance work is what we call performance-based work. It's work done proactively, ideally before the asset has failed. It takes the just-in-time concepts that were used to reduce production cycles and inventory, and applies these same concepts to the practice of maintenance. Organizations doing performance-based work are doing the right maintenance work at the right time. So how do we identify what is the right maintenance work? Gartner, an IT research firm, has identified this strategic roadmap for maintenance. At the bottom is the traditional approach of running equipment until it breaks and then scrambling to fix it. A better approach is preventative maintenance that's done either based on time, based on replacing the oil in your car every 3 months, or based on usage, like replacing the oil after driving 5,000 kilometers. Most traditional computerized maintenance management, or CMMS systems, support these 3 approaches. However, studies have repeatedly shown that the best trigger for when to do maintenance work is not the passage of time or even usage. The best trigger for when to do maintenance work is the condition of the asset itself. You can monitor the asset health and only intervene when the condition is showing signs of deterioration. If you can do that, you will do less maintenance work and have fewer breakdowns. In fact, for most types of equipment, there are now predictive techniques, such as oil analysis or vibration analysis, that can trend asset condition and predict when it will deteriorate, well before the deterioration is visible to the naked eye. The current state-of-the-art in defining optimal maintenance strategies is called Reliability-Centered Maintenance, or RCM. This approach starts by defining the function of the equipment, the ways in which it can fail, and the consequences of those failures. It then selects from any of the strategies described further down on the chart to pick the strategy that will minimize the overall cost, safety risk, and environmental risk. The formal RCM process is quite rigorous, so variants such as FMEA or failure modes and effects analysis, MTA, maintenance task analysis, have been developed to financially optimize not only the strategy selected, but also the method for selecting the strategy. Sophisticated mathematical techniques can be used to optimize the cost trade-off between asset failure and maintenance. This first part of the Bentley APM overview presentation has introduced asset performance management, described how it fits in the overall asset lifecycle, and justified why it's worth spending time to think about. The presentation is continued in Bentley APM Overview 2, where we will describe the Bentley APM methodology, which is our approach to helping organizations migrate from a reactive to a proactive maintenance approach. We will describe how the software supports the methodology, and will provide an overview of a typical APM implementation project.